The other day, last week, I received an email from my sister-in-law that I wanted to share. Now, my sister-in-law married my oldest brother about 6 years ago. Very nice. She's a pioneer, has been for years. My oldest brother's an elder. Don't really have a lot of conversations with them. We certainly don't call and chat. I think in the 6 years that they've been married, maybe I've talked with my sister-in-law at a family event half a dozen times, perhaps, maybe not even that much. So I was very surprised to get an email from her the other day, and the subject was Return to Jehovah. Hi, I've been thinking of you and your family lately. I'm sure you will agree that we live in very dangerous and violent times today. We want to protect our families from this violence and terrorism that we see on a daily basis now. But we could honestly be in the wrong place at the wrong time, and we or one of our family members could become a victim of this violence. It really is a sobering thought. Yes, it is. Jehovah really desires to protect his sheep from this violent world. And you, Curtis, are one of his valuable sheep. He would love for you to return to the flock with your family. I would love to see you return as well, along with the rest of the clan. I hope you read the attached brochure and think about it. You are a great brother-in-law, and I'm sending this email to you because of my love for you and your family. Love, your sister. At the bottom of the link, at the bottom of the email, I should say, was a link to jw.org, where there was the electronic version of the brochure, Return to Jehovah. I thought that was kind of an interesting email on a couple different things. First of all, I never talked to my sister-in-law or my brother. I certainly don't confide in them. Typically, when I have any dealings with them, it's really just chit-chat more than anything. And I was wondering, does her email really mean to suggest that by me becoming a Jehovah's Witness again, that will protect me from violence? Because her email started off by saying we live in a violent world, we can just simply be at the wrong place in the wrong time, and then immediately segued into Jehovah wants to protect his sheep. So is there somehow some protection that I would have by being a Jehovah's Witness that I would get that otherwise I wouldn't have? Well, that was interesting. They confidently assume that I do not go to meetings. They would be right about that, by the way. But without talking to me and understanding whether I do or not, the assumption was you don't go, so therefore read this brochure. And this brochure will help you to see the error of your ways and what a loving provision it is for Jehovah to try to welcome you back to the fold. So when I opened up the link that was included in the email, there is the electronic version of the brochure, Return to Jehovah. And one thing that I was not aware of, because I don't look at the literature on the website very often, is there's a feature by which you can push the play button and the page that you're looking at will be read to you. So there is a letter from the governing body, and I'm thinking, well, this should be good. So I push play, and the voice of Stephen Lett appears. And I knew this was going to be a long page to read. Now, I don't know Stephen Lett personally. He might be a wonderful person, but his on-screen persona is very unnerving. The melodrama with which he speaks and the histrionics that he used, coupled with the facial expressions he uses, it comes across as patronizing to me. Dear fellow believer. And so on. So I couldn't listen to the rest of that, so I didn't. But when I looked at the topics that were contained in this brochure, apparently there are 3 topics or 3 predominant reasons why somebody would leave the Jehovah's Witness organization. One of which is they have anxiety about something, or they have this term that Jehovah's Witnesses use, which is called they're battling with negative emotions. I think most of the world would call that depression. So anxiety and depression, or anxiety and negative emotions, however you want to read that. The other option is perhaps I had a problem with a fellow believer. Somebody didn't treat me the way that I wanted to be treated, and so therefore I'm holding some type of personal grudge. That's the other topic that's addressed in this brochure. And then the third and final option, the only other option apparently why somebody would leave being a member, is because they have guilt over some type of hidden sin. So the entire subject matter of this brochure that was sent to me by my sister-in-law, not knowing anything about my circumstance because they never asked me or talked with me about it, they assume because I am not attending meetings, therefore I either am struggling with negative emotions and anxiety, I have a grudge against a fellow former believer, or I have some type of guilt over some type of hidden sin. Those are the only options. So my reply to my sister-in-law was very succinct. Thank you for your sincere concern. And I just left it at that. There was no comment made about the content of the brochure, whether I had read it or not. I acknowledged her email to me. I would be very surprised if she didn't turn in on her field service report for the month of August an electronic placement. And whatever time she spent in composing that email to me, I'm sure that that time was also counted as well. But it got me thinking about the relationship that Jehovah's Witnesses have with the publications that they use. Because very often they'll find the appropriate publication to deal with whatever subject that they're talking with somebody about, and they will provide that publication in lieu of or instead of talking with somebody about the subject, letting the publication do the talking, do the explaining. So somehow magically a problem would be solved if the appropriate piece of literature is put in front of a prospective person. So I wanted to start off by indicating that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society is a publishing corporation. It is a business. The product of this business is to make publications. That's what a publishing company does. They make publications. So whether it's in printed format or electronically making their materials available, that's what their products are. So when a company, let's remove it from Watchtower for a moment. When a company puts out a product, one of the things that they have to do is they have to get people to be aware of their product. They have to get people interested in the product. They have to connect emotionally with their consumers so that their product can get in the hands of their consumers. When you're a publishing company, you want your product, the end result, to get in front of people who can see it, who can hold it, and who can read it. So most publishing companies have an entire apparatus of marketing agents and marketing reps and agents and distributors, all of which are compensated for getting the product into the hands of the reading public. So how do you get millions of Jehovah's Witnesses around the world and adherents to volunteer their time, their energy, their money, and their efforts to promote the products that the Watchtower Society publishes? Corporations will very often use the tactic of having a celebrity endorsement. So for an example, if you're putting out a book, you might have a quote or a screen capture from perhaps a newspaper or a TV program that reviewed the book and found that it was favorable. So when you open the back cover of the book, on the cover of the book, you might see maybe quotes from other authors saying, "I really enjoyed it. This author's fantastic. I love all of his work." There might be a review from, who knows, maybe Time Magazine or Good Morning America or whoever would review that, whatever the professional reviewers or critics would be. Depending on the topic of your product, let's say that you put out a book having to do with personal finance. Perhaps somebody who is recognized as a leader in personal finance would endorse your product and say, "This is a good book. The contents of this book are very, very helpful. I've used some of these principles myself." Perhaps it's a respected business leader. If you're putting out a business book, somebody who is an accomplished and recognized professional in the business community, if they endorse your product, the idea is people who would consider reading your publication would be drawn to it as a result of that celebrity endorsement. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society has convinced their readers and their adherents that they have the number one endorsement in all of the universe. God, Jehovah, the creator of heaven and earth, the Father in heaven, has endorsed this product. Not just endorsed this product so as to say, I approve of the contents of this product, but rather, the Watchtower Society tries to get their adherents to believe that the creator somehow had a role in making sure that this product was made available to the public as food at the proper time. That God used the channel of Jehovah's Witnesses to produce the product that they are reading. They even go so far as to suggest that God has anointed this corporation as being the only source on the planet Earth of spiritual food. That the only the products that come from this corporation could be considered spiritual food, and that to the exclusion of all others, that no other source exists. That's quite an endorsement, isn't it? And I think if you were to talk to most witnesses feel that, yeah, that's true. God has endorsed this organization, has endorsed Jehovah's Witnesses because they have his name. Therefore, any publications that come from this organization are therefore a provision from God. It's very hard to beat that endorsement. So, as a result of believing this, when any topic arises, a Jehovah's Witness will typically find the appropriate piece of literature on whatever the topic is and provide that to, in my case, a relative or a coworker or a friend or a member of the public. If somebody is dealing with the death of a family member, I'm going to provide them with a publication having to deal with comfort from the scriptures when it deals with death, holding out the hope that there's going to be a resurrection. If somebody's having a problem within their family arrangement, well, I'm going to offer a publication which talks about the topic of your family life being happy and how fulfilled that can be, etc., etc. And that's exactly what my sister-in-law did with me. Jehovah's Witnesses have always had a very interesting relationship with the products that come out from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. There's an arc or a life cycle to the relationship that comes between the witness and the publications. Where this relationship starts, well, so at the beginning of this arc is at the conventions. So the convention season that we're most of the way through now, here in the summer of 2016, when there's going to be a release of a new publication, there's a lot of excitement. They're excited that there's this new provision. I wonder what it's going to be. I wonder what new truths are going to be held out. So the publication is a provision from God. So therefore, God is responsible for this publication existing. When the announcement is made, here's a new publication we have, the news is greeted with thunderous applause, and there's just delight. Very often, the Watchtower will show videos of delegates to the convention holding their new publication to their chest, and they get emotional, and they're perhaps overcome with emotion, and they're crying, and they're just filled with joy as a result of it. So some months after the convention season is over, what ends up happening is when a witness goes to their normal meetings at their local congregation, interest is further drummed up in this new publication. And what they're trying to say is they want now to focus, instead of just the witnesses reading it, they want the public now to benefit from this marvelous arrangement. So the idea here, or the message always is at the meetings, get this product in the hands of the public. The thinking is once this publication is in the hands of the public, the power of the message contained in this publication will do all the talking. You don't have to explain what's contained in this brochure. You as an individual witness, you don't have to explain all of the thoughts that this book contains. Just get the publication in the hands of the public, and the book will do all the talking. The wisdom that's contained within this publication will be inculcated into the minds of the readers. So that's the early stages of a Jehovah's Witnesses relationship with a publication. Excitement, looking forward to it. How do I help other people benefit from the information that's here? Maybe a few more months goes by, And then what happens is the book might be considered at the congregation meetings. So the book is considered paragraph by paragraph, question by question, page by page, chapter by chapter, and the idea behind that is to get the Jehovah's Witness intimately familiar with the contents so that way they can make more placements. Once they know what's in it, they can very easily talk to other people about it, perhaps say how much they enjoyed the publication themselves. In some cases, that consideration of the publication at the local Kingdom Hall might be more than one time. And the reason that they would do that is to reinforce the timeliness of the message. That in this world that we live in, this deteriorating system of things, we have never needed this message more than we do now. And so that's accomplished by having these regular meetings every 2 days, every 3 days during the week, so that this message gets reinforced regularly. So that's the middle portion of the life cycle of a piece of literature. So we've gone beyond the excitement stage, and now witnesses have to become very, very familiar with it. But occasionally what happens is the message contained in the publications becomes overly familiar, and sometimes it might even become stale. It might be a situation, for an example, where it has happened where somebody who was quoted in a publication has took exception to the fact that I was never interviewed, a quote was used from me that was made to make it seem like I agree with or I support a position that's taken by the Watchtower. And that was never my intent, the quoted person might say. There have been circumstances where somebody who was quoted in a magazine, like say for an example, a historian or a scientist might have been quoted, and their quote was taken so out of context and was used in such a misleading fashion that they have sent the message to the society saying, do not use that anymore. Do not put out a publication that has my quote in it anymore. I don't want that being done. And so sometimes that gets a little uncomfortable, that gets a little embarrassing, so therefore a revision to a piece of literature might come out. 1966, 50 years ago this summer, was a very notable and very exciting year for Jehovah's Witnesses. So at the time in the mid to late 60s, there were about, give or take, 1 million witnesses around the world. So when they went to the convention in the summer of 1966, they were greeted with the release of the book Life Everlasting in the Freedom of the Sons of God. Most Jehovah's Witnesses today, of which there are more than 8 million around the world, if you were to say the publication Life Everlasting and Freedom of the Sons of God, they would have no idea what you were talking about. If they went to the website, they wouldn't be able to find it. If they went to the local Kingdom Hall library, they would not be able to find it either. Well, what's so important about the 50th anniversary of this amazing piece of literature? The notoriety that has been assigned to this book is because it got the Watchtower in trouble for setting expectations surrounding the year 1975, which by their calculations, meaning the calculations of the Watchtower Society, it was the milestone in 1975 that was going to be upcoming, that man had been existing on Earth for 6,000 years. And so, wait a minute, I know what most Jehovah's Witnesses are going to say, we never said that. We never said anything about 1975. Well, those of us that have taken the time to research it know that that is exactly not true. So if you go to the Life Everlasting book and you go on page 29, it specifically indicates that how appropriate it would be for Jehovah God to make this coming 7th period of 1,000 years of Sabbath coincide with the reign of his son Jesus. It would not be by mere chance or accident, but would be according to the loving purpose of Jehovah God for the reign of Jesus to run parallel with the 7th millennium of man's existence, which would happen in the fall of 1975. So that was on page 29 of the book, Life Everlasting. How many Jehovah's Witnesses today, of the 8 million plus Jehovah's Witnesses, are even aware that that publication exists? Well, when you're a corporation and you're putting out products, occasionally you have a misfire. Occasionally you have a product that comes out that maybe wasn't received in the way that you wanted to. Maybe a product just needs a freshening up or a refreshing on occasion. So in 1968, the book came out, the Truth book, The Truth That Leads to Eternal Life. A very, very popular book. That was the book that I studied, for an example, when I was a young boy. One of my older brothers studied that with me prior to my baptism. The Truth book was a small pocket-sized crystal blue book. As a matter of fact, urban legend has it that the famous song Crystal Blue Persuasion was a nod to the Truth book. I don't know if that's true or not, but at any rate, the idea behind the book was, let's put together a quick study guide so that somebody who is interested in finding out the truth about the Bible would be able to very shortly, in just a few months of study, be able to acquaint themselves with basic Bible truths. Because 1975 is coming. Who knows what's going to happen in 1975, but let's make sure that we can very quickly indoctrinate as many people as possible with the basic truths of the Bible. 1975 came, 1975 went. It became a fundamental embarrassment to the Watchtower. When is the last time you heard a quote or a reference in Watchtower publications to the Life Everlasting book? I think there are some witnesses, if you said the Life Everlasting book, they might say, well, you mean the Live Forever book, right? No, I mean the Life Everlasting book. So it was relegated to the dustbin. That product had had its entire arc. The relationship that a witness had in 1966 with that book, oh my goodness, it's divine truth, it's new light, it's so exciting, now became, we don't even want to talk about it, we never heard of that, we don't know what you're talking about, we never said that. They completely deny the message of that book that at one time they held out as being a provision from Jehovah. So the Truth book, where's the Truth book today? If you went to your local Kingdom Hall, could you find a copy of the Truth book? If you go to jw.org, if you go to the Watchtower Online Library, where's the reference to the Truth book? It helped presumably millions of people come into the organization. When's the last time that you saw a quote having to do with the Truth book? Well, what ended up happening is that needed to be updated. So in the 80s, they came out with the Live Forever book, which was a new product. It was freshened up in the sense that it had a more pleasing format, apparently. So the Truth book didn't really have anything in the way of illustrations, but the Live Forever book had a number of illustrations. So even though it contained a lot of the similar information, it was considered to be a basic study guide. It was something that a newly interested person would be expected to review page by page, paragraph by paragraph, to become acquainted with Bible truth. Where's the Live Forever book now? Well, the reason the Live Forever book isn't around, and the reason that only people have their personal copies that you can't find it on the website, is because it came to light that there was some embarrassing content in there. Some people felt that there were subliminal messages in some of the illustrations that were contained in the book. There's also some information which seems to indicate that one of the illustrations was a direct lift from an illustration in an adult magazine. So that became a little bit of an embarrassment. So what happens is then the knowledge book came out. Again, a basic study guide. So you'll notice that, why is it fundamentally, has this truth changed from 1968 to the mid-80s to the mid-90s? If the message was still the same, why did a new product have to come out to contain that message? It's because the message had to be marketed in such a way that the public would find it appealing. So if all of these publications came from the Creator, and the Creator endorsed them, why would we need to upgrade them? Either the Creator was involved in getting this publication out to the world, or he wasn't. If he was involved, why can't I find that publication anywhere? If he wasn't involved, how can we possibly claim that the organization that printed this publication was endorsed by God, or that this publication was a provision of the Creator himself? Either he is involved or he isn't. So do you think, for an example, when the Bible was being written, do you think that when King David was writing the Bible, that his opinion was, don't pay any attention to those writings of Moses? That was centuries ago. We have a much clearer understanding of what the truth is now. What happens if, when Daniel was writing his part of the Bible, you can disregard what David said, because that was the understanding of Jehovah's people and the nation of Israel at the time. What I'm writing today, that's the current information. So you can disregard what David wrote in the Psalms, for an example. When Paul was writing in the Christian Greek scriptures, did he ever give any indication that what he was writing made null and void, that you could disregard the previous writings of David and Daniel and Moses? When the Apostle John was writing the final book of the Bible, did he give any indication that what I'm writing will now supersede the understanding that we had earlier when Paul was writing those things? I can already hear the comments of Jehovah's Witness apologists who might comment on videos like this, so as to say, well, here's the difference. The difference is the Bible was directly inspired by God. Publications are not. We just do the best we can to write down what our understanding is. That doesn't hold any water, because when a publication is being released, it's being released as a provision from the Creator himself. So if it's a provision from the Creator, it stands the test of time. Subsequent publications do not make void earlier publications. That certainly wasn't the case in the Bible. Why is it something that's acceptable to Jehovah's Witnesses? Every time the leadership of the Watchtower organization changes, the current leadership is not interested in defending the teachings of its predecessor. So go back through the entire history of the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. When C.T. Russell passed off the scene, Rutherford had no interest in trying to defend the teachings of Russell. He made his own teachings, and many of them were exactly the opposite of the teachings that Russell had just a few years earlier. The same thing continued when Rutherford passed, and it was now Nathan Knorr's turn at the helm. He couldn't quickly enough distance himself from the teachings of Rutherford. And the same thing too, on and on. When Franz was the leader of the Watchtower, he distanced himself from some of the main teachings that Knorr propagated under his watch. So today's governing body is no different. Today's governing body has no interest in defending the teachings from the Franz era. Books like Life Everlasting in Freedom of the Sons of God. You can't find that book referenced anywhere. You can't find it on a website. You can't find it on the Watchtower Online Library. As a matter of fact, if you were to bring up that book, if you had a PDF copy of the scan of that book, and you were to show it to a Jehovah's Witness, they would be convinced that not only was that something that was not a current teaching, they would feel that because you're showing it to them, that now their own publications are apostate literature. So it's gone from being a new light of truth to apostate literature within 50 years? That doesn't seem right, does it? So today's governing body, not only does it have no interest in trying to defend the teachings from the Franz era, I was recently looking at JW Broadcasting number 10, which came out last year. And this is the one that you might remember where Anthony Morris III was defending some of the positions of the Watchtower as a result of the Australian Royal Commission. Now, the tactic that the Watchtower took when they were defending their position at the Australian Royal Commission was they were trying to suggest that of all the mainstream religions in the world, Jehovah's Witnesses were the very first ones to identify that child molestation and child sexual abuse was a problem. And to prove that, their writings, Anthony Morris on JW Broadcasting number 10, brings out a hard copy of an awake that was written in 1982. And he referred to that awake as being a landmark article. This landmark article had some information saying that we live in a permissive society. Part of being in a permissive society were attitudes toward sex, and that even sexual abuse of minors has become a problem. What a disgusting world we live in. Let's look to the future, look for the New World Order and the new system of things to fix everything. That was this landmark article that he was referring to. Now, it's interesting that he used the term landmark. A landmark, by my definition, and perhaps by yours as well, a landmark is something that you would use to identify the direction you're going. Am I heading in the right direction? How close am I to my destination? You would judge that by landmarks, as an example, if you were driving down the street. So if this was truly a landmark article, does it stand to reason? I mean, it only came out in 1982. Does it stand to reason that you would be able to find that landmark article somewhere online? If you go to the Watchtower Online Library, if you go to the CD-ROM, if you go to jw.org, If you go to your local Kingdom Hall library and try to access a bound volume, a hard copy of the Awake magazine from 1982, would you be able to look it up? Would you be able to corroborate what Anthony Morris was saying in that JW Broadcasting episode? If you can't find it, it's not a landmark. You cannot find writings from the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society that are made available by that organization that go back to the 80s or even the 90s in most cases. You cannot find publications that go back to the time period prior to when the existing governing body received their authority. But there's one notable exception to that. When you go to the Watchtower Online Library and you look under books, and under books, not only does it show the title of the book, it also shows the year that that book was released. So all the books are 2000, since the year 2000 to today, with one exception. There's one book that was released in 1986. It was revised in 1989, and you can still see the 1989 version of the book Reasoning from the Scriptures. So it stands out. It stands to reason then that if all the other publications from the 80s or 90s cannot be found on the website, this one particular publication can be found. So let's take a look at that. So if you look at the Reasoning book, the 1989 version that's available online, look up the subject of Jehovah's Witnesses, which can be found starting on page 199. Jehovah's Witnesses, in their own publication from their own Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, have taken it upon themselves to define themselves. Who are Jehovah's Witnesses? So when you go take a look at it, the definition of Jehovah's Witnesses on page 199 of the Reasoning book is the worldwide Christian society of people who actively bear witness regarding Jehovah God and his purposes affecting mankind. They base their beliefs solely on the Bible. That's the primary definition that they give. When you go down to, it looks like I believe there were 10 different ways that Jehovah's Witnesses choose to identify and define themselves. Number 8, how they define themselves, how they view the last days. They believe that we are living now, since 1914, in the last days of this wicked system of things. That some who saw the events of 1914 will also see the complete destruction of this present wicked world. That lovers of righteousness will survive into a cleansed earth. That is a definition that Jehovah's Witnesses gave themselves. It's who they are. It's how they define that. So if you were to show a Jehovah's Witness, go to a metropolitan witnessing cart, wherever they might be in your neighborhood. Have them open up Watchtower Online Library. Have them go to the Reasoning book. It's notable that here's one thing that stands apart from all the others because it's something that's from the 80s. Everything else has a printing of the year 2000 or newer. Go to the definition of how they define themselves. Read them definition number 8. It says specifically that this generation that saw 1914 start would not pass away before the present system of things comes to an end. If you did that, Jehovah's Witnesses will immediately dismiss it. We have a new understanding now, is what they would say. Well, wait a minute. You have a new understanding of how you identify yourself? Who you say you are? That's a new understanding? Other people didn't define you. You defined yourselves. And that's changed since the 1980s? Well, if it's new understanding, why can I still access that information online? Why are you still making available to people information that's on your website if it's not accurate information? So if the way that you define yourself isn't accurate, well, what else isn't accurate? So therefore, the arc, or the lifespan of Watchtower literature, as it relates to your average Jehovah's Witness, is when it's new, it's a glorious provision of new light from Jehovah. Once a witness becomes familiar with its contents, it now becomes a familiar and trusted friend and a resource. Once the publication ages, it's at that point that it becomes, in some cases, an inconvenient embarrassment that in some cases might even be denied. Does that sound like a loving provision from God? Something that doesn't even have a shelf life of 50 years? Or does that sound more like the lifespan of a commercial product that's released by a publishing corporation. So going back to that email that I received from my sister-in-law last month, or last week, she threw a piece of literature at me. That's all she did. Whether it applied to my personal circumstance or not, it was irrelevant. The beauty of the truth would come out to me, apparently, by reading this piece of literature. In the eyes of a witness, there is no problem that a piece of literature can't solve. But that's a two-edged sword. Because over the course of time, there's no problem that a piece of literature can't make happen either. So there are things that we are being messaged today by Jehovah's Witnesses that will not stand the test of time. Even fundamental teachings, like who they are and how they define themselves. Thanks for watching.